think we're ready to go. Today is our third Coffee with Karl from TRIDEC headquarters. Today we'd like to welcome Congressman Dan Newhouse. Congressman, thank you for joining us this morning.
Well, good morning, Karl. It's a pleasure to be with you.
You bet.
Using this technology we have available.
Yes, sir. I think we're all living in the same the same new era nowadays with our meetings for sure. Well, we've never met face to face, so I appreciate the chance to meet virtually in the world that we live in. Like I said, this is our third Coffee with Karl, and we kind of started off very informally, and this is just an informal chat. So we're looking forward to a good conversation and to get some of your insights about what's going on locally here in Washington and then back in Washington, D.C. So we start talking about coffee, and I'll kick it off, and I'll throw you a softball since I read your bio and did see that you have two. Yeah, so this is actually my wife's coffee cup. I bought it for Mother's Day 2 years ago at the Bookie in Pullman. So that's kind of my coffee story. I am just full admission, I'm not a cougar. I kind of joke about it. We call myself a Costco cougar. You know, if the cougar gear's on sale at Costco, that's where I get it. I'm a vandal from just across the Palouse. But do you have a coffee story or coffee mug story you want to kick us off this morning?
Well, let's see. I wish I had yours. I have coffee mug envy. How's that?
That's good.
So congratulations to your wife. You know, I've been using the same mug for, can you see that? For about the last 5 years or so.
You bet.
I don't know if you can read. The Ag and Forestry Educational Foundation.
Oh yeah, I read that on your bio.
Which I'm a graduate of, and it's just the perfect size. And so fortunately I haven't broken it. It's been 5 years and here it is. So, but that's my go-to mug every morning. Oh,
that's great. Well, I grew up in Ag and Timber family. So can you tell us a little bit about the Ag and Timber Institute, did you say, that you graduated from? Where's that at and how does that work?
So the Ag and Forestry, it's an educational program, educational and leadership. It's gosh, I think it's in its 42nd class, and those class members will correct me if I'm wrong. I was in one of the earlier classes, and it's a program to broaden the horizon and perspective of potential young leaders, and it's just a really great program. It lasts for 2 years. For about once a month, the class gets together in different parts of the state. The first year they take a national trip, usually end up in our nation's capital. The second year they take an international trip and to see a different form of government, certainly a different economy, things like that. But you learn things from the prison system to the communist system. I went to China in my trip.
Oh, wow.
So it's really a great program, encouraging people to get involved, participate, helping to train new leaders. So I found it tremendously helpful.
That's great. So obviously today's discussion, very generally, we talk about rebuilding the Tri-Cities and some efforts and some connections with Washington D.C. But I think before we started the call this morning, you mentioned that you'd been back in Washington D.C. earlier this week. So just out of curiosity, what's it like to fly on a plane back to D.C.? Are the planes completely empty, or are there safety concerns, or how does that go?
So how long have we been in this now? A couple of months. Early on, it was the eeriest, weirdest experience I can describe. Airports are literally empty. The little trains that you take from the terminal out to your plane. Many times I'd be the only one in the train car.
Wow.
There were several flights that I've taken that there maybe were 2 or 3 people on a 737, and that's not counting the crew. Wow. Yeah, it's just the weirdest thing. Today, like I was just back a couple days ago, there's more people out. There's more people flying. A few. It's not crowded by any means. It takes seconds to get through TSA. There's no waiting anywhere. None of the restaurants are open except maybe some of the the little newsstands, things like that. which are now interestingly carrying grab and go kinds of meals. But the flight back from DC to Seattle probably had, I'm guessing, 24 people on it instead of 2 or 3. So, not by any means full, but I think people are beginning to have to do more and more comfortable. But the city of Washington, D.C., I tell you what, it's like you feel like you're on an episode of Last Survivor or something. It is dead. There's nobody. You can cross Pennsylvania Avenue and not have to look both ways. I mean, it's just, there's nobody out. It's a government town and nobody's open. And so everybody's working from home. And so it's a very weird feeling there. Most cities around the country that I've been to, though, there's a little activity. Traffic is nice, actually. You can get around easy and all that, but it's just a very surreal feeling around the country.
That's it reminds me of on 9/11, I actually lived in Seattle, but then worked for Caterpillar back then. So I was back in a suburb of Chicago, and I'd fly back and forth, and I happened to be in Chicago when 9/11 hit. And so O'Hare Airport and all the airports in the country obviously were shut down for almost a whole week. And I was on one of the first flights out of O'Hare, and I remember just, taking a car back into the airport where there was nobody there. And to your point, it's so amazing when you're in these structures that are built to hold and transfer millions of people and no one's there. I think you described it really well with an eerie feeling.
Yeah, I think it's probably one of the safest places to be too, because they keep things clean and there's no one there.
That's a great point. Well, Congressman, let's get into some questions this morning. We kind of opened up for questions this week, and we took a look at them, and we'll start off with one. And you and I talked about it. I just moved literally down the Snake River from Lewiston and Clarkston to take this job, and very happy to be here in the Tri-Cities. But we had a question about the Snake River Dam. Since the draft EIS comment period has closed, it seems like the rhetoric and the general public discussion around it has died down. But do you have a feeling if you think that that's just related to COVID, or what do you see as the next steps? And could you talk a little bit about the Lower Snake River dams and what your position is on it, and what do you think the future is for them?
Oh, good question, Carl. That's it's probably a combination of the two, I would think. COVID has certainly dominated the news for the last several months. Every story you see on any kind of news outlet is about the pandemic. So that's what's on people's minds. But I think too, coincidentally, the comment period ended in April, and I think people, for the most part, feel like they had a good opportunity to weigh in and express their opinion. We had, I think the number was something over 3,000 individual comments. And because of the pandemic, the in-person meetings were canceled, as you know. And so people were allowed to express their feelings online, which I think in a rural area like the Pacific Northwest, that actually enhanced people's ability to be part of the decision or part of the comment. So I think since that now we're just waiting for the next steps, I think that's probably why you don't hear so much about it. But as far as the future of the river system that we've come to depend on, I wish I had a solid, clear answer on it. I can guarantee you, though, that this will continue to be a struggle for some time to come. I would anticipate there will be more court cases, more challenges. Hopefully we get a positive decision coming out here soon, and that we can move forward with a clear pathway ahead of us. I'm going to continue to fight as hard as I can because of the so many benefits that the river system, the dams provide for the whole region. I think it's just critical for us moving forward. And so I'll be at the forefront of defending the status quo, making sure that our important infrastructure can remain in place and provide us with all the benefits that it does for years and years to come. But like I said, I can guarantee you that will not go unchallenged that this discussion, this argument is going to be with us for a long time too.
You bet.
I would encourage people to get involved too. Please, I need people's help in order to win this fight.
That's a great point. I think we all, especially in the political process, want to be as involved as possible. And this is one that, collectively, when we take things for granted, we don't know what we can lose until something actually changes. So you have a great point. And I know from TRIDEC's perspective and our partners, in the business community, in the Tri-Cities and the region, we're firmly behind you, and we want to do what we can to get the public out for sure. So let's move into, I don't want to say your home field, literally, I guess it's kind of a pun, but talk about agriculture a little bit. And again, because we haven't met, but again, I did my research on your bio and see that you own your third generation farmer, I think, in your family, about 850 acres in Sunnyside, and grapes and hops and tree fruits, I believe, is what I understand. And then obviously in your history, you've been the director of the Washington State Department of Agriculture, and also ag degree from WSU, land-based ag school for the state of Washington. So can you talk a little bit about, have you seen any changes for yourself on your farm, as it applies to anything that's out there? And then one of the things we're seeing here locally is that there's oversupply in so many agricultural commodities. Here locally, we've seen the oversupply of potatoes, and of course, like the potato growing associations had giveaways, and our own David Replog has been working to try to connect some of those surpluses into areas that are actually, literally starving. He's trying to organize get some trucks going to Las Vegas with a connection that he has through the Energy Communities Group. So can you talk a little bit about that? Like, maybe have you seen any impacts on your farm? And then also from a federal perspective, do you have any ideas or thoughts about maybe how USDA could help, both move some of that surplus around? And then how do you see us from an agricultural perspective coming out of this shutdown?
So huge questions, and
as you
can
we could
imagine,
break it up. Sorry to lump so many together.
I just wanted to express how this is what's on the minds of many farmers in the region, as you can imagine. I had a friend of mine send me a video of a tractor disking up a newly planted field of potatoes. The plants were just small, and I just read a story this morning about a dairy farmer dumping 30,000 pounds of milk out in his fields. It's just, while at the same time people are going hungry. It's just a crazy dynamic that we have. I was able to visit Second Harvest last week in Pasco and see some of just exactly what you're talking about, and talk to them about the need to get the food to the people that need it. Truly, we have an issue not in our food production side, but in our, I guess, what would you call it, the supply chain, and the ability to make those connections. And so that's the challenge. USDA is stepping up in many ways, given the tools that Congress has provided for them, and using their creativity to try to connect those dots. It's certainly they're stepping up their purchasing of some of the commodities to try to get them into food banks and to institutions, to some school settings where there's still some feeding programs going on at schools, those kinds of things, to try to help where they can. Plus, there's several programs that have been put into place to provide financial support for farmers as well. And so I think we're looking at that right now in Congress to see if that's adequate. My opinion is that we have fallen short, and I think there's a lot of interest in increasing the amount of resources that would be made available to farmers. If you compare agriculture to, say, the aerospace industry or the airlines, we have not received our fair share. And right. I think that the food industry is absolutely a national security issue for our country. We have got to provide security, not only to make sure that people get food on their tables, but that we continue to have a strong agricultural industry. And so making sure farms are resilient, get through this pandemic, and come out strong on the other side is the challenge that we have, and we're trying to address that in many, many ways. But federal government does not have enough resources available to it to make sure that everybody remains whole in a long term. We have got to reopen. We've got to get our markets back on track. We've got to return to some sense of normalcy in order to make sure that our ag industry, as well as all of the other parts of our economy, can survive and thrive. So that's our goal, to reopen the economy. Just like the title of this segment, we're trying to do that smartly, safely, and as quickly as we can.
You bet. Oh, those are great points. So before we leave the agriculture field, we had a question about workforce, especially here in central Washington, realizing how much factor in agricultural production the workforce is. And again, so while I was doing my research last night on your website, I was really interested in the bill that passed the House late last year that you had a large role in, the Bipartisan Farm Workforce Modernization Act. And maybe this question's about ag labor, but could you talk a little bit about that legislation, kind of your input on it, and your thoughts and feelings about how it applies? Didn't read that it had passed the Senate, so I assume it's in the process, but can you talk a little bit about that bill?
Oh, absolutely. That's one of the things that this pandemic crisis is making very, very clear to us, that we, if you didn't realize already, we depend on a stable workforce, and agriculture is no exception. And farmers want a stable legal workforce. The state of Washington, the Pacific Northwest, we produce a lot of high value crops, a lot of specialty crops, very labor intensive agriculture, and which is different than many parts of the country. And so we worked very hard in the House almost all of last year, bringing forth this bill that we were able to pass, and now it's in the Senate, to do exactly that, to help provide a legal workforce, a stable legal workforce for the agricultural industry. I've always said that it's just crazy for our multi-billion-dollar industry to depend on a workforce that is not here legally. I mean, that's just an untenuous situation. You cannot defend doing that. And so I've been very, very active in that, working with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, which I think is absolutely necessary if we want to be successful at this. We've tried, both parties have tried to do something on their own. It just doesn't work. It's not sustainable. And so we're working as hard as we can to get something to the president's desk that would be a long-term viable solution for our agricultural industry. You're right, it's in the Senate. I hope they're working on it. Of course, the pandemic has kind of pushed everything aside, and it's taking people's attention. But I think this is one of those things that as part of the larger conversation that we need to have about our food supply and the security of our the food industry. The labor force has definitely got to be a part of that conversation. And I'm hoping that because of the pandemic, we can focus more on that here in the coming months and get something passed this year. I'm the eternal optimist. I think we can still do that.
Well, you have to be being a farmer, right?
Yeah,
you don't think that
you do.
That the rain's going to come and the sun's going to shine. It's pretty hard to be in your field, I would imagine.
That's right. Exactly.
You bet. Well, I think that's a great point, because I know so many states, agriculture that relies on that steady workforce is such a big part of their economy. And it's just exciting that you've been able to work across the aisle, especially, and be a part of this solution. So if there's anything we can do to support that, let us know if it's getting the word out or organizing anything locally. Would be a huge help. And I think ultimately for all of us as Americans, we're all immigrants. We've all come through that
Oh, that's
process.
right.
And to your point about giving folks a legal path to citizenship and to be a productive part of the workforce and to pay into our social network, those are really great solutions. So thank you for working on that.
Yeah, yeah. Appreciate the offer of help. We'll take you up on that.
We're there for you. So let's move into maybe Pacific Northwest National Lab. With the capabilities that the lab has in science and technology and research and the complete gamut of the work that they do there, do you have any ideas or have you heard any conversations about maybe there's a way that we could leverage some of the technology or the research that's done at the lab, or even future projects? To your point, I've heard you talk about stabilizing the food security chain, and is there any way to leverage the asset that we have here locally with the lab, maybe on future funding sources or anything that you've heard out? And I'll maybe throw you another some information. The Brookings Institute late last year came out with a report and talked about technology centers. And it basically talked about in the technology field and technology companies that the trend today is that companies follow the talent. And so technology talent, as we know, is clustered here in the Puget Sound area, San Francisco Bay Area, San Diego, Austin and Boston are kind of these tech centers. And so this Brookings Institution talked about, maybe there'd be a way to federally push research outside of those centers to help to build talent around that. And I think on a smaller scale, we've already got that with PNNL. So you have any ideas or think about, obviously we read about future CARES funding or even stimulus, ways to bring the economy back out of that. But have you heard of any conversations, or do you have any ideas or thoughts about maybe a way to involve PNNL on, how do we come out of this and make our economy even stronger?
So well, I'm glad you brought up PNNL, and that's something that, as a newcomer to the Tri-Cities, I know you will come to appreciate as something that is truly special. We have a tremendous number of men and women at the laboratory, the National Laboratory. They are working on a numerous amount of different kinds of work that are really looking to the future. It's really a fascinating thing, truly a jewel of the Pacific Northwest in the National Laboratory here in Richland. And so I was out there last month, I guess already, and talking to Steve Ashby and others about exactly what some of the things that you're bringing up, how they can be helpful in this pandemic specifically. And they've been working on a lot of different ways to help in the testing and the tracking, the tracing of the coronavirus, which will help us. That's one of the things that almost every governor and the task force under Vice President Pence is saying that we need, is to be able to test people, right, and be able to keep a handle on where the hot spots are and where we need to focus our attention. And I think the lab is going to be a big part of how we can successfully do that. And I don't know if you realize, but I'm a member of the Appropriations Committee, and
Yes,
a lot of the things that we talk about on particularly the Energy and Water Subcommittee focuses on the activities out at the lab. So I've been a strong proponent of making sure that the laboratory has the resources they need, because they're working on things such as the coronavirus, but also other things that are so important to our national security, to strengthening our electric grid. Some of the things that we talked about, the dams, they're very engaged in research to make sure that the migration of salmon through the dams can happen successfully. Just a tremendous number of things that impact our ability to do what we do here in the Pacific Northwest and around the country. So I can't speak highly enough of the work done out at the National Laboratory, and I'm very committed to making sure that it remains a strong contributor to the future of our nation. And so I absolutely think that what you're suggesting, the ideas from the Brookings Institution, are actually, we're seeing that play out right here in the Tri-Cities.
Oh, that's a great point. And I do want to thank you for your support and ongoing support for the lab. I actually just got an email from Steve Ashby, and he said to make sure that you thank Congressman Newhouse for your support. So we really do appreciate it. It's been, me being new to the Tri-Cities, when I went through the interview process, it was kind of interesting because when I was here for the first interview, my predecessor, Carl Adrian, actually mentioned that there was this book written about Sam Volpin test by Mark Smith. And so I bought the book and read it before my second interview, and it helped me so much in understanding. But, that book's a great example of, the transition in Hanford from, weapons production, and then really PN&L became such a huge economic driver and, source of work and jobs here in the Tri-Cities. And it was good for me just to get that background in history. So yeah, we're all huge supporters. And anything else we can do to what you're talking about, bringing these new initiatives that again, tie into the Pacific Northwest, which is, so let's go right down the road to Hanford. Congressman, you were really instrumental in the first CARES Act in putting language in that gave Hanford Department of Energy and the contractors the ability to be shut down and being, paying employees, so they wouldn't have to go through the layoff process and then bringing workers back. And so thank you very much for that. But what do you see coming up in the future for Hanford? Have you been involved in any discussions about coming back online? And then obviously, again, we mentioned David Replog from the TRIDEC team, but we work closely with your staff on the appropriations every year. And it looks like that process, even with COVID, is starting to come up. So can you talk a little bit about Hanford, what's going on there? What do you see coming up in the future?
Sure. And thanks for pointing that out. The work that's done out at Hanford, as you will learn if you don't realize already, Carl, is critical. It truly is. You were talking a little bit about the history of the area. It's a fascinating history, and the role that this area played in not only World War II but in the Cold War. It's the whole story is really fascinating. And so the new the B reactor, we're showing off some of our history through tours of that, and then the new national park. And we want to continue to promote that, and when we get back to where people can travel, I'm sure that's something that we'll focus on even more. But let me first of all just applaud the Department of Energy and the Hanford contracts and the workforce for the way that they've been handling this crisis that we're in. The worker safety is of primary importance. It always has been at Hanford. It's got a new dynamic now with this disease that we're all facing. But I read just yesterday, I think that the site will phase in returning to work on a safe basis, again with worker safety at the top of mind, ensuring that the work can continue, but safely, of course. And so I just want to be. I guess the biggest thing I need to say about Hanford is it's critical that we get this cleanup work done. And the constant in this whole discussion, I've been in Congress now 5 years, a little over 5 years, and I've seen a lot of change in the members of Congress. There's a constant turnover of due to elections and different reasons. The argument will always have to be made that the federal government has a legal and moral obligation to finish the cleanup at the Hanford nuclear site. And that's a huge commitment on the part of the federal government. It's expensive, and it's going to go on for a long, long time. But the necessity of completing this work is absolutely critical to the future of our region. And so that's something that I will continue to work with all of my colleagues here in the Pacific Northwest. That's a good thing that we are blessed to have a commitment from people on both sides of the aisle in all of our neighboring states to get this work done. So we're going to utilize all of those assets that we have to continue to make the argument that this work must be completed. And we've made a lot of progress, even in the short time I've been in Congress. A lot of progress out at the Hanford site, and we're looking forward to some really good things happening in just a very short time out there as that work continues. So thanks for bringing that up. It's an issue that we spend in my office probably an inordinate amount of time actually on Hanford. It's the issue for the 4th District of the state of Washington, and it's just so critical for our region that we continue to show success there, so that we can continue to be able to bring the resources to bear from the federal government. And David's right. We're right in the midst of that process right now. I'm feeling good about where we are at this point, but we're a long ways from the finish line. And so we'll need to continue to work very, very hard. As you know, as we're sending trillions of dollars literally out the door to beat this crisis that we're in right now, to make sure that the priority that we have at the Hanford site continues to be a priority, not just for me, but for Congress as well.
You bet. Well, Congressman, thank you for all your work. And, we with TRIDEC and David Replog, especially our Federal Affairs Vice President, we really appreciate the partnership that you and your team have. You guys are great to work with. I'm just brand new, but I can already see that there really is a team approach. And I think that we've collectively got a great track record of getting the funds that are critically needed for Hanford to do just what you said, so that we can clean it up in a timely fashion and, get it back into not having to worry about spending all the money to clean it up in the future. Right. So thank you.
Yeah. The role that TRIDEC plays is critical too. It really is. And I want to extend my appreciation to everybody at TRIDEC for that help. It's invaluable, and we couldn't do it without the local community's support. So appreciate that. You bet.
So we've got a couple questions from our audience, and it relates to COVID-19 and the federal role. And your role in Congress, you may be involved in some of this stuff. We'll just throw it out there, Congressman, and see what you got on it. So from your perspective, what's the federal government doing to increase access to testing, COVID-19 testing, and increasing that supply? And maybe that's not a legislative issue. That might be more in the executive branch of government. But could you talk about that? And do you see an increase in just access through the state of Washington to those tests? You talk about reopening. We might move into that a little bit, but do you have a perspective on that, or do you guys work on it in Congress?
So, yeah, that's one of the areas, along with the PPE, I guess, that we found ourselves maybe not as prepared for as we should have been as the coronavirus raised its ugly head. So what we've been doing, and this is, I've been very proud of the fact that we've been working quite well across the aisle in a bipartisan basis as a delegation. We have, like a lot of people, the last couple of months, it seems like I've been spending on the telephone or in Zoom calls like this, virtual meetings. Our delegation has been doing that with the governor and agency heads in the state of Washington to stay abreast of what needs are here in the state of Washington. And then we can communicate that to the administration to make sure that those needs are recognized and realized. And so we respond as Congress, make sure that the resources are there to provide the testing materials necessary to secure all the silly things like the swabs. It was a big holdup for a long time just to get those. So getting all of the necessary supplies, both in the testing capability and also in the PPE side of things. That's certainly you're right that the administration kind of oversees all of that, but they need to have the resources available to them, and they need to make sure that they are hearing from the states as to what things are most necessary, where their focus should be. And so that's been our role. And like I said, it's Vice President Pence even came out to the state of Washington, if you recall, for that reason, to as we were kind of at the tip of the spear at the time. The state of Washington had the first case, the first real outbreak, and he wanted to hear firsthand from local leaders, what do we need? What are you seeing on the ground? How can we as a federal government be most helpful? And that's set the tone for the last few months, and it's been a very, very positive working relationship. And so I've been happy about that. And that's the way as you say, we're going to get through this together. We've heard that so many times. It's absolutely true. And we can report that that's how we're working here.
That's, I guess, just as a new constituent here in the district and in the state, it's really heartening to hear you talk about working across the lines and working as a delegation. That makes such a difference. And, so many times not being critical of the media, but, we hear about political divides and those things. And so it's just great to hear directly from you that, you know what, when the rubber hits the road, you're working as a team, you're working to come up with great solutions for all of us here in the district and the country. So thanks for that work.
So you mentioned where you were on 9/11.
Yeah,
I brought that very point up on the House floor, and when we were passing the first CARES package, I told everybody, this is our 9/11 moment.
Yeah.
And as you remember, people worked very well across the aisles back then. We were all Americans. We weren't Republicans or Democrats.
Yeah.
We were Americans. And this is similar to that, I think.
And I think, I'll just a little aside, but I'll just say it is nice to see us come back together. And it's too bad that it takes a crisis, but at least during a crisis, we can do it. And I think that, I'll get a little bit deep here, but it amazes me. And too many times we don't talk about it. We talk about, we all have pride in being American, totally agree with that. But the reality of it is we are the oldest representative republic in the world, right? We still have a constitution that I'm not really good at math, but it's coming up on, someday in the future we'll be at 300 years, or for the Constitution will be a little bit longer. But, the original document and its amendment process is still in place, and it's still the system that when you go back and represent us in D.C., we're still going through those same things. So it's just, I guess, heartening as an American generally to say, in a crisis, we can pull it back together and we get things done that are going to do the best that we can. To your point about agriculture, we can't do everything to bring everybody back up to where they were before the crisis hit, but we can sure do a lot. And maybe with that, do you want to talk a little bit about your work on the CARES Act and what you see coming up in the future for future legislation? Obviously, we hear a lot of reports that there's more work going on and which sector of the economy it might affect. But what do you see as the next steps?
I mentioned the next steps, and I think there's work going on right now. In fact, we were supposed to be in session this week. The speaker decided to postpone calling us back. It's a little bit of an open question when we go back now. Maybe next week, maybe not. But there's work going on. So in a couple areas, I think, and maybe even more than I even realize at this point. But one thing is to kind of tweak some of the things that were done in the first couple of go-rounds. As you can imagine, propping up, or starting so many new different programs in a very, very short period of time. There's been some glitches, some problems that have arisen. And so addressing some of those shortfalls, I think, will be part of the package. I think one of the issues that people want to address is somehow providing more assistance to state and local governments. They're going to be experiencing some tremendous budget shortfalls here. I think our own state in the next couple biennia will see a projected $7 billion shortfall. So there's things like that there's interest in. as we talked about earlier, the seeing if there's more that we can do in the agricultural industry. I think that that's absolutely a necessity to make sure that our ag industry is able to rebound once we get things back open as strongly as possible. So keeping farmers as intact as possible, I think, is absolutely essential. But and I can tell you, I've got a meeting later today as well, talking about the future and our budgeting and the debt that we are continuing to build up, which was already a problem before the coronavirus. But with the amount of resources that we've had to come up with in the last couple of months, has exacerbated that issue as well. So there's talk about, okay, how do we address that in a way that can get us back on solid financial footing? For so many reasons that's necessary, not the least of which, what if we have another COVID-19 type event in the next near future? How are we going to respond to that? Are we going to continue to print money to respond in a way that will help people? And so Congress has got to get a handle on our financial future as well. So I'm hoping there'll be some things included in this next package as relates to that too.
Sounds good. We talked about 9/11, but in the last recession, in the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act era, or the Stimulus Act, there was money that flowed here, specifically I think into P&L, and while I wasn't here, what I've been told is that some of that money, as well as the way our economy is made up, that the recession wasn't felt as deeply here in the Tri-Cities. So do you think there's any talk in this next piece of legislation? We talked about ag a little bit, but do you think there's anything that would be more of a stimulus type, versus more the CARES Act in the past has been just trying to keep businesses open, and hopefully that is extended here to ag and egg producers? But any thought about, like a stimulus, and what's your feeling on that?
So, no, there absolutely is some talk about what do we do next? We were responding to the crisis and trying to do everything we can to make sure people are safe and healthy. But how do we get our economy back up and running? And one of those things that has seems to be getting some traction is the idea of an infrastructure effort. That's been a priority of the president for the last 3 years. Never really gotten off the ground in a real way. So this may be something that could actually stimulate the economy, get a lot of people back to work, get some things done in the country that need to be addressed as far as infrastructure is concerned. And I think that the Central Washington, we could stand to do quite well in a situation like that. We have a lot of things that I'm not heard the word shovel ready a lot lately, but that was part of our vernacular back then. But we have some things in Central Washington that literally are shovel ready, whether it's water projects in the Columbia Basin or the Yakima Basin. Certainly some of the things that are happening and need to happen at the Hanford Reservation. There's a lot of things that we could point to as in order to get the economy moving again, people back to work, we could make that happen real quickly. So whether that's part of this next package or something down the road, I can't tell you, but there certainly are a lot of conversations about that and how do we make that work.
That's great. Maybe just a side question on that. Obviously, you've been very, very influential in the nuclear power industry and with some of your roles in Congress, and then the connector here, even with the research on P&L. But small modular reactors and some of that new nuclear technology. Do you think that might be maybe not shovel ready, but like an investment source, that would be a huge, obviously help for us. You work very closely with Congressman Simpson from Idaho and INL, and obviously they, are the first site for SMRs, but you see an opportunity there. And especially I think with the thing that we haven't talked a lot about lately, obviously very controversial, but climate change and carbon free and all those things. But, nuclear is actually the schedulable carbon free power source. So do you think that might be something we could, that might get into a future bill or go that direction?
Oh, I think it absolutely could. Absolutely. You're right. Many of the things that were, I guess, at the top of mind before the COVID issue, like climate change, you really haven't heard a lot about lately. But if we're going to have a conversation about what kind of infrastructure projects would be most advantageous to the country in a lot of different ways, certainly clean energy, I think, is something that could be well received by people on both sides of the political spectrum. And so we are well positioned for that. And you're right, we have a great partnership with the folks over in Idaho. And so I think that given our proven track record with nuclear energy and really the culture we have of providing clean, renewable energy in the Pacific Northwest, that's an obvious thing in my mind for us to focus on. And I think that there would be a lot of support for. I guess one of the challenges is going to be, just so you know, there's going to be a finite amount of resources that we can bring forth to put towards infrastructure. What is infrastructure? The definition of infrastructure is going to be a very interesting conversation. Everybody is going to have an idea that what could be included under that umbrella, and so we're going to have to make our case very well as to what kinds of things we want to see included in a package like that. Whether it's water or energy, or whether it's, some people think it should be schools, or certainly roads and bridges always come to mind, but airports and all. There's all kinds of things that we're going to have available to us to fall under that category. So, but I think looking to the future and the need to have a growing supply of clean, renewable energy, SMRs make perfect sense.
That's great. Congressman, we're down to about 8 minutes, so maybe I'll ask you one more question and then ask you to make some closing comments. And I don't know if you had anything else you wanted to cover today, but maybe again, especially with your experience as a farmer and then former director of the State Department of Agriculture, you want to talk about supply chains and international trade as it applies to agriculture. And obviously we talked a little bit about within the U.S. trying to get some of these surplus crops out and stuff, but do you think there's going to be any changes, in exporting our agricultural products, this global supply chain? It seems like there will be changes on where we source things like PPE and the things that have really come up in crisis. And then, in this whole period, there's been a lot of discussions about as a country, we've moved to just-in-time supply chains and, no inventory of many, many different things. So do you want to talk a little bit about trade, global trade, maybe, hone in on ag, what you see coming up in the future, or anything that may change out of this crisis you see?
So it's interesting you asked that question, Karl. My next meeting is about the food supply chain. Okay. And focusing on how we can improve it and how we can prevent finding ourselves in this situation in the future. I guess to start off with, I would say that I'm very happy to see the administration focus on our nation's farmers and ranchers to try to do what they can to make sure that they continue to be successful into the future. It's not easy. as we've seen, and I think there's more that needs to be done, and I'm hoping that we can focus on that. You know, prior to the pandemic, President Trump was very focused on our trade relationships, certainly with the Canada and Mexico, making a lot of headway with China. And I hope that that's still in place as we, you know, our relationships with that country have been strained, to say the least, over the last few months. So a lot of work will continue to have to be done there, and other countries, and particularly the Pacific Rim, but really all over the world. And so I think that the message there is that we need to, now more than ever, continue to work as hard as possible to develop and maintain the markets, our international markets. We in the state of Washington, more so than almost any other state in the country, depend on those international trading partners. We have developed an agricultural industry here that is second to none, and people around the world love our products, and we need to make sure that they can continue to buy them. And so that's going to be a huge part of my focus going forward. Like I said before, the federal government doesn't have enough resources to keep farmers and ranchers going unless we open up our markets. It just has to happen. And so that's going to continue to be one of my priorities. And you're absolutely right. There's a lot of people that do not ever want to find us in this position of being so dependent on foreign sources for critical things like the personal protective equipment, for instance, that we found ourselves all come from China. Things like that. I think there's going to be a lot of focus on how do we encourage, how do we make that change happen to where a lot of things that we depend on in a crisis situation are made right here in the U.S. and that they will be available to us at high quality, at the right price. You know, there's been a tremendous amount of price variation, I guess I'll just say, and quality variation on some of these products, and it's truly been a shortcoming. And so that we don't want to be have ourselves in that situation ever again. We shouldn't be reliant on other countries for critical kinds of things. It should we be faced with this kind of a crisis into the future. So I think you're going to see some changes there.
Sounds good. Well, Congressman, we really, really appreciate your time. Like I said, you've got other calls that you've got coming up. But just out of curiosity, have you spent all your time away from Washington, D.C. On calls like this? Have you had a chance to get out the fields or do any actual farming?
So fortunately, I have. I've been able to get out on the farm a little bit.
Good.
Help my son as much as I can. You know, it's a busy time on the farm, and I try to make myself as relevant as possible as I can on the farm. And it's great. You know, you're right. Spend a lot of time doing this, staying in touch with people, having virtual meetings, conference calls. So the farm turns out to be great therapy too. You know, getting back out and getting dirty and actually seeing something positive happen as a result of your work, and that's always a good thing.
You bet. Well, Congressman, we do see a lot of good positives coming out of your work. So, you know, thanks for your time this morning. Do you have like a closing statement that you want to cover, or we've got about, you know, a minute and a half or so?
Well, thanks for taking some time to spend with me this morning. I appreciate it. Thanks for the plug for WSU. Great school. We'll get you converted at some point, Karl.
Okay.
But you know, this is a great country. I firmly believe in the people of this country, the people of the state of Washington. I've been really, really proud of how people have responded to this crisis that we are in. You know, most everyone is taking this very seriously and recognizing that it takes personal responsibility for us to be able to be successful here. And so I've been very delighted and proud of what I'm seeing in my constituents and my fellow citizens throughout Central Washington. And I think that that really says a lot about who we are, about the bright future that we have. And so I'm looking forward to us as a whole taking that knowledge that we've gained over the last few months and reopening our economy, getting back to work, getting back to school, doing it all as safely as we possibly can, but restarting our lives and our culture and getting back to normal. And I think that that's the way that we're going to get through this. It's been great to be hunkered down, I guess, and staying home and staying safe. My honey-do list is a lot shorter than it used to be. but we've got to get things back on track, and I've been working as hard as I can to make sure that we can do that as quickly and as safely as I can, and we'll continue those efforts so that will all happen. But appreciate the time with you this morning, Karl. I really do. Look forward to seeing you in person.
Yes, sir.
And getting to know you, and welcome to the Tri-Cities. Welcome to the state of Washington.
Well, thank you, Congressman. Thank you for your time this morning. And, just as a new member of the 4th District, and thank you for your service. I think, we always talk about military service, but I'll just say that you and our other elected officials do such an amazing job. You're in the spotlight. It's easy to be critical, but it's a hard road to go down, and we appreciate your service. So thanks for representing all of us. Thanks for your time this morning, and stay safe, and we'll keep this conversation going.